close answers through the research that we're doing in Papagayo, in the Pacific region in Costa Rica. First, we're going to have the participation of Dr. Christian Golche. Christian Golche is an academic from the Chorotega region, the National University. My name is Andrea Suarez. I didn't introduce myself. The coordinator for the center located in Liberia, in the Chorotega region location. Christian works as responsible of the hydrographic spring management, and he's also part of the hydrologic career. And he participated as an academic and participant in the co-building of the hydrological career that it will be taking place in the Liberia location. He had a master's in science of planning and management of the territory in the University of San Carlos in Guatemala, and the doctorate in science of water in the University Agritech in France. He's a member of the civil representation in the organization of Liberia and coordinator of the communitary participative monitoring of Pampa. So we're gonna give a warm welcome to Dr. Christian Golche, and he's gonna do his presentation called Evaluation of the Quality of Water. No, that's not the title. He's maybe gonna say it himself. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. And it's an honor to participate in this important event. I also have to say that for me is also a privilege. I'm very happy to be here presenting this work and presentation with my colleagues as well from the Hydrical Center. It's a center that is focused on the problematic of the water, mainly in the Chorotega region, that we opened our doors on 2012. The presentation for the urban in places in the Chorotega region. We're going to tell you how we've been working, and it happens that Costa Rica, as you already know, it's a country that has been evolving in its environmental policies. It has been increasing important efforts of conservation, but we, as Costa Ricans, we recognize that rivers and superficial body waters, water bodies, they have been presenting several conditions that compromise the flow of the environmental resources, endangering the livelihood of communities. So this is where the alliances are important. This is what we're going to be insisting a lot. Alliances, networks, collaborations, multidisciplinary organizations. And there is an organization called here the Rivers and Springs Alliance in Costa Rica. And together with the National University, we have joined efforts to promote a new social organization that is based on voluntarism and that does recovery and monitoring of the superficial water bodies. And these organizations are known in Costa Rica as the Citizen Observators for Water. The Center for Water Resource has been developing a training that is scientific and technological for the status in which the superficial waters are on, from the perspective of the microbiological health of the water in the Pacific North. And this has been made basically with the focus of the water springs, and together with other academical universities like CEMEDE, the social promotion, and the geography school in Zurich, which has this application known as cloud water, and the alliance and the citizen observators that have been developed in the region, we have conformed a working group to see how this hypothesis works out, that if we make people participate in the scientific processes, these people can get empowered in processes that are highly participative to promote a task which is pending in the country, which is the control and the recovery of the urban rivers. Move on. So basically the purpose of this project, which is like a new stage, and when I say a new stage is that what we used to do was the conventional monitoring of the quality of water, but we, from our lab, we would do the visits, we would establish monitoring points in the superficial waters, and we would, with frequency, do the observation of different parameters, chemical and biological parameters, but with the intention of generating information that is useful for the decision-making processes. But it seems that something is missing because the information that we've been generating maybe it's not always useful. And then we ask ourselves why that can happen. The method to oversee this is that maybe people are not getting involved in these processes. So what we try is to strengthen the monitoring and the recovery of the rivers through the sharing experiences and strengthening of the social capital of the observatories of these waters, so that we can recognize themselves as part of the observators of the water, and for them to know this others as their peers so they can share experiences. The other one is the local empowerment of observators through the citizens monitoring. So we teach them, and they need to get to know how the water is in their bodies, but they not always know how to do it, and that's why we try to empower them through the observation processes. Third is strengthening the local leadership through participation campaigns that are volunteer for the good recovery. And then the last goal is the analysis of the reach, the experiences of the communitary extension to generate knowledge and capacity of self-management for the process of recovery through a management model of knowledge that the national university knows it as a systematization based on experiences. And this project in general, what it looks for is to develop in the interchange and sharing of knowledge, the promoting the gender equality, the participation of women, including the participation of students, that develop in the process their skills, soft skills, scientific and technical and academic and professional skills, and we expect that the accumulated effect of the project can enrich the consolidation of the model of the Observatoire of Water as an integration for social integration, with the end goal, which is the recovery of the water bodies. So basically what we see is that in Costa Rica, the recovery of the rivers is a task that is well pending, and that internationally we even recognize that Costa Rica is a country that has known how to change their tendencies and patterns in the recovery process. They have been able to recover the forest through the program of the payment for environmental services, but we can observe that rivers, for example, the state has the capacity to make the basins and the water bodies and the superficial waters to be in the best conditions, and we also add the fact that we have future scenarios for the Pacific North that are going to affect the waters depending on the amount and the quality of the resource. Next one. So just to highlight again that this is a complex problem from a technical point of view. So rivers are subject to high pressures, and pressures can create this variability of the quality of the water and the space where we have sources of pollution that are continuous and or eventual, and that there are accumulative effects below that affect the cycle of nutrients, and it affects the ecological dynamics of the water bodies in the surface. And for example, this study from Craig et al. Talks about the interactions of how there are synergies between different versions throughout the whole basin, and the comprehension of the quality of the water and these pressures can effectively be an exercise that is complex. But apart from the fact that it is complex, from a social point of view as well, this is something very social. If we understand it as a socio-ecological system, which is the water dynamic is. And it's so social that, for example, in Liberia, which is where we've been putting a big part of our observations through the research of social studies, we know that people perceive and see the Liberia River as something that is dangerous and dirty, and it's very little what people can do to recover these water bodies. So this is what we attempt to do, is that people that are not scientific or scientists and that are not enrolled in any kind of process or involved in any kind of academic process, as that we work on it, what we try is for people that don't have this background or this training, so that they can get integrated within the scientific processes, like showing them how to do the register, observation, analysis, interpreting, so that they can see their own results, and as a community they can be mobilized and applied as people think is convenient. We've observed that the science is something that we apply for many fields, like in policies, market, but also environmental out there. People then relate to the object of study, for example, the water in this case, the water bodies, and we increase the public awareness around these topics. So the observatories of water for us is an opportunity to increase the knowledge of the state, because there's a lack of data out there in the tropical regions. We are lacking data. So this allows us to increase the knowledge of the status and the knowledge of the superficial waters, as we increase the awareness of citizens that are in areas that are more marginalized. So that is what we look for, strengthening the capacities as a citizens' empowerment mechanism for the recovery of these rivers through a method of territory, sharing knowledge, systematization of experiences, and science. Being the first specific goal, the one that I was telling you about, that looks to strengthen the social capital, where we have groups of observation for water and that they can do this sharing of experiences. We've been doing that since, this has been a whole process, that we're doing this hydrological observation in the Liberia River since 2013, but this project is active since last year. And we've been doing this efforts for sharing of experiences, and we already did the second goal, which is related to the monitoring of the quality of the water, doing adaptive protocols, because not everyone has the instruments, the tools, and whatever we use to do our observations. So we need adaptive protocols, which we have developed and we are implementing with the different groups. We have monitoring programs right now that are active in the region, in the Chorotega region, because of these adaptive protocols. Then we have everything related to the strengthening of local leadership through participation campaigns from volunteers. Many of them are known, like conventional, like cleaning, recollection, and others that are not well known, like remediation, like the launching markets. These are very popular in Costa Rica now, and that they consist in using mud spheres with mechanisms that allow us to degrade this organic matter and to break it down, which is related to the remediation and recovery of the superficial water bodies. So we gather people to get to know the rivers that they live with, and again, systematizing this experience of the community with the citizen observatories to generate knowledge and capacity for self and management for the monitoring and recovery of these water bodies that are superficial. So some general images. See how we've been working the observatories. This is our group of people that are varied and very different and very diverse. Sometimes they are more or less institutionalized with the participation of the Red Cross, with the water organization, conservation areas, but not always. In other occasions, it's simply groups of people that are enthusiasts. It could be youngsters out there, or retired people, elderly people that are eager to know about these topics. And with this, we have the technical professional schools that have become an important actor and stakeholder. So there we see a lot of interest to get to know about science, biology, the hydrological topics, and we can see how different spaces can be created for training on field, activities from the community, markets and fairs that we do out there in the city, some encounters and sharing of experiences, and we develop then technical capacities and also soft skills between the group of people so that we make sure that these groups are each time more and more autonomous and stronger. Now, some of these observatories look for their own funds. They manage to get it because we're also having the long-term sustainability as something important. The challenge is how to make an organization that works on voluntarism. How can they stay motivated and active throughout time? So that is the support that we give, because we have identified that these efforts have to happen at many different levels. For example, this chart. With this one, I'm going to finish.
Basically, on a local level, we have these observatories here of water that sometimes they aren't called observatories for citizens of water. Sometimes they are under other names of other institutions that have really good practices. And then there also exists around 120 observatories for citizens of water, and here in Chorotega we are working with 6. So what happens here in the regional level, what we have identified is that these observatory groups have a technical support, a technical ability to help them understand what it is they need to observe and how to observe it. And so then these entities here at a regional level are the ones that help them, and us as Hidrosec, we hope to establish ourselves as a technical entity in Chorotega to provide that support to empower their abilities. And that is Hidrosec in the Chorotega region, or also we can refer to CATIE in the Caribbean, or TEVU, or even this university, National University, UNA, also has an important participation in what happens here in the Central Valley. But it's important that it's not only these organizations, there's also some national organizations such as the National Alliance of Rivers and Basins, and then the program of the Blue Flag that has been institutionalized. This observatory has become institutionalized, and now that we see that there's a group of people that want to participate in the hydro basins need, in order for them to participate, they need to subscribe as an observatory for the citizens of water. And that's the way we've been working here. But there's a lot of people that actually already do this anyhow. So that's the approach we have. We try to not enforce that or have them change their name and kind of subscribe as an observatory, but for them to kind of take that into account. And we've seen that that has been working. And then also we see the articulation that needs to be happening in the hemisphere. We've had an alliance in America where we have different type of actors, academic institutions, consultants, private consultants, and there is a representation in this hemisphere. So we also have that we have a representation from Spain, kind of an Ibero-American. So it's a space where we can exchange experiences regarding this monitoring of water in a volunteer, as volunteers. And here in 2021, there was a meeting, in-person meeting in Chile, and now we have this one here in Costa Rica. So we have different bulletins, different spaces, different areas where we can really integrate those experiences from Patagonia to the United States, Canada, as to how we monitor and how we can motivate people to participate in these processes of monitoring water. So basically, that's the effort that has been that has had an evolution. Basically, it started from a disciplinary to multidisciplinary and now transdisciplinary, and different stages, whether that be local, regional, national, and then in the hemisphere. Because these are efforts that, although they aren't very common in regards of the monitoring of quality of water, but there is a lot of knowledge that we can exchange. So it's a valuable effort. And so I want to thank you, and I am available for any type of question, consultation. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Dr. Kristen Golcher. In the introduction, I also forgot to indicate the time that each person has. Each presenter has 20 minutes. He did a good job. Anyhow, we will have 3 presentations in the first block of the agenda, and then toward the end, we will have questions and answers for the 3 presenters, and then we will continue with the second portion. So you can all know that. And now we will continue with the Master Joana Rojas Conejo. She is also an academic from IDROSEC. She coordinates the quality of water from different hydro cycles. She also has several studies, and she has a license from this from University UNED, and she has a lot of experience with water from also the National University of Nicaragua. She specializes in water quality and mining relating with water, and she has also led several programs that monitors different capacities in regards to water quality. And she has also worked with different governmental institutions for aqueducts and sewers. 6 years ago, she's also an investigator and a professor in Chorotega in Guanacaste for the university, National University. So thank you. You have the floor. Good morning. It's a pleasure to see all of you here, all of the known faces that have participated in the monitoring of water quality in Hidrosec. The title of our presentation is The Evaluation of Water Quality in the Lower and Middle Portion of the Basin of Tempisque River, the results of monitoring and the environmental impact. So, Rio Tempisque, for those that don't know, this is the third largest river in Costa Rica, and it's the largest one from the Guanacaste province. It's a river that protects many species, lagoons, and the striped area here is the lower portion of the river, the lower portion of the basin, and there we have three great conservation areas from the SINAC that are working there. We see a lot of species, a lot of biodiversity there. The river, you can travel in the river, and it leads out right into the corner there. That's not on the map, but it's right there. It's around 36 kilometers, and then that area is where. Okay, can someone teach me how to use this? Okay. And so then when it's been rainy season, we can move a little bit further into the river, depending on the tide. Okay, so there are a lot of protections of species, and that's done through the natural reserves of SINAC. We have refuge of wildlife and many others. However, as everything in any protected area, we have our challenges. We have the challenges of our forest fires. Last year, we had 4,000 hectares that were burned within the reservation, within the reserve. Okay, so we have the technical issue. And in that forest, and in that fire, many species died, as you can see here. But sometimes someone has mentioned that what mainly was burnt was Tifa, which is a good thing because we had a lot of overpopulation and then, well, really what was burnt was actually beneficial. And so then that ash becomes solid within the Tempisque River. Okay, in River Tempisque we have other activities. We have some tourist activities that travel within the river. They navigate the river. We also have other activities within the basins, especially in the lower portion. We have agriculture. They cultivate rice and sugarcane, and they also extract sand, and that's all with permits. And that's all allowed because there's a lot of sand there. And with all the activities that we have in the river, we also have different discharges from different industries. We have some contamination, some pollution. We have several companies that are working within the industry and, well, with agriculture. So we started seeing some hints of this pollution, and the people that worked with protect the different wildlife became aware of this because they saw that several fish died within the Tempisque River. So then the CIGEPEN came about. This is an institution that came forward to ask for the support for the INESEM, and then that's how we started this monitoring using different funds. Within those different hints of pollution, of contamination, we see maybe the river has a different color, maybe a lot of organic discharge or a loss of oxygen. We have some discharges that have different nutrients that aren't beneficial. We have several even discharge channels that have even solids, and they discharge that into the river. And so that leads us all to believe that there are some contamination that is coming into the river. So these monitoring periods help us understand how this contamination is working in different parameters and also in different specific points. And then here in the 2017 period, they started working with our institution. We would monitor 14 points from some that were really far away, even from the Liberia River, a different river, and all that would lead to different Toro Island, so different areas of the river. And then in a different period of 2020 and 2021, we no longer had funds. So we went to the funds for the observatory for the National University, and we focused on several areas of the river that we thought were more delicate, that were more in need. And those are the orange areas that are signaled here. And then from 2022 to 2023, as a summary, from what we've had in all these years, we have a large worry because in these areas here where there is a specific sector here of the river, there are many channels that have different foam of different colors. So we monitored that more specifically. We have 11 points here. And we started monitoring the quality of the water within this period of 22 and 23, and then also at the same time from 2021 to 2024. So currently, so from funds from the second portion of the project, we are working with 11 areas here from the Guardia Bridge, which is our point of control point, throughout the river in these areas. And when we monitor, we also measure different parameters of the quality of water. We are an organization, and thankfully we have the participation of students, assistants, volunteers. And in those images, you can see how we're working in the measurement of those parameters. We monitor with different equipment, and you can observe us at work here in the pictures. And then also we take samples of superficial water. It is dangerous. It is, we have to recognize that there is a risk because first there are many lizards here, and they're there all over the place. And sometimes we want to obtain a sample, but there's no way where we can kind of drop a bottle. So she just kind of laid there as she could, and she got the bottle, and she obtained a sample of water. This is Dr. Christian Gualcher there in the picture as well. He has helped us a lot. And the students are here in their practice and different monitoring of water. And you can see here from the main source, we also work in different smaller areas, different sources. And then we take that to the laboratories from the hydrosec, and we provide analysis of liquid, solid microbiological analysis, and we've seen how that has performed in the river because there's a large of fecal excrement, and we see that in the samples as well. So also going to speak a little bit of the results that we've obtained in the monitoring of the quality of the water. Just kind of a summary, but of the most important that we've seen. We've undertook an analysis of oxygen, ammonium, and DBO5. Those are what is indicated in quality of water. So that's what we go by. And by that, we are able to see if the water is contaminated or not. And then also in Hidrosec, we also do the analysis of water that has even more parameters than just these three. But for now, we're just going to speak about these three. And then we can see here for the oxygen, many data has a large saturation between 50, 60 to 100. That's the saturation. That's good. That's a good percentage of oxygen. Ammonium is under 3 for each milligram. And the DBO for the oxygen demand, we see that it's actually quite low as well. We have seen some portions that maybe creep up to 20, but that's very specific. We have seen some dead fish at certain points as well. But then we can see here within these this Dutch parameters, we see the different classes here. And we define the interpretation of the quality of the water. So we see this here in the graphic with the data. The different classes, there are 5, but we reached only till number 4. And we see that most of the data are in class 2. That means that the river in a general portion, it has a low contamination. And in some months, there has been a bit more contamination, or in some others, there is no contamination at all. But in general, it is an incipient contamination.
Now, in regards of this pollution, in this other graph, I wanted to show that in the different years of the monitoring, that goes from 2017 to 2024. Here we have all the campaigns, that there's an emptiness and a lack of information. These were the first proof. But we had to eliminate this because they were not complete. But the majority of the data that we have determined are in this period. And we can observe that the majority of the points that have been analyzed here are in class 2, incipient pollution. Some of them are moderate and some of them without any pollution at all. More specifically, from the last monitorings of the more recent years, we have been focused mainly on these points, having into account point of control, the Maria Bridge, which is halfway in the watershed, and we finished the monitoring in the Tepisque River mouth at the Gulf. We have the Bebedero River as well in the Gulf, and different points here that represent different situations. For example, this point number 2 is the mouth of Liberian River. Once it goes through Capsa, it gets into some kind of channel and pathway here in Tepisque. And this point 3 is the Senada mouth. It used to be El Salto River. These points that we observe are located before and after the sector in the river, because we've seen several situations that have been happening. When we did this channel for the river, we can see that water goes through faster here. So there is a lot of sediment being taken. And there's a lot of accumulation of sediment here because of the different pathways that we have. So the tides come in and they get up to this sector in the wetlands. So there's an accumulation in the sector from the river, and this is where mainly we have navigation and tourism activity. In this sector that corresponded to the older river, that were the channeling before that happened, actually, we have swamps and low values here that compromise the quality of the river. So when this gets its mouth gets to the Tepisque River, oxygen levels are below 0.5, and then it recovers its oxygen and it is better and raised here. So just to talk a little about detail of the specific points. In this graph, I wanted to show from these points from before specifically how the behavior is in these points. So for example, this point 5, which is the sector that I was telling you about, which was the older Tepisque River, we observe that in these occasions, this river has demonstrated class 3, many of the periods that have been sampled. Moderate pollution. We have other points, for example, the mouth of Bolson River, that the river has presented class 2 pollution, and it has been kept there. So different situations have happened during the last few years for each point. Some of them have improved their conditions, some of them increase, and that's why it's important to continue with the monitoring to understand how the behavior is. Then about nutrients that travel along this river. We have, for example, the nitrate concentration. These have been kept low. Sometimes we have found concentrations that are high in these intermediate points that were specifically points for the Tepisque River, not necessarily in the main riverbed, but in the main riverbed and others, we observe that if we relate these points with the first monitored points, these tend to get lower, and they lower their concentrations of nitrate, which happens to be good, although we have some points that suddenly increase their concentrations. And these are separate events where we have had situations with fish, and so in terms of phosphates, we can observe that when we used to measure it on 2017 up to date, we had the concentrations have been lowered a little, and I dare to say that it is maybe because of the analysis methods. We need more analysis for this topic. Then, in terms of the solids, for solids that are sedimented, which precipitate, and the suspended solids as well that are kept in the columnar water, this is a little bit more worrisome because we see that in some of the sampling at the beginning, solids were low, but then we started finding that solids had increased. They have increased their concentration. For example, look at the suspended solids here. And points, all of them have increased their concentration, and we've even got to find up to 600 in suspension. But this is mainly in points. For example, the point that I was saying that is just after the riverbed. We have all the sediment and then the tide. It happens in the Tepisque River mouth in the Gulf of the Bebedero River. There are points with a lot of suspension points. But in general, this data is around and higher and above 100. In the superficial water quality, it tells us that solids in water higher than 200, these waters are considered class 3 or 4. So these are waters that have important compromise in terms of solids. Now to finish off, the clarity of the water starts changing. We started measuring that in 2021 up to date. We didn't have tools to measure that, but Now that we have this cloudiness and haziness in the water, we observe that we have haziness that is high, superior than what the norm indicates of the evaluation of superficial waters, and we can associate that with these situations, like the mix of the tides. We observe that when it starts raining, when we have the transition of dry to wet season, we start seeing more bacteria, nutrients, and everything increases because every activity in this riverbed starts carrying, and we have events that happen with fishes as well in the Tepisque River. Then in the rainy season, we start getting these contaminants and pollutants, and we have more specific events with fish, but that's when we have important loads of residual and polluted waters, and it's not raining, so there's no dilution at all. I wanted to put this image from HydroSec. We have done training to different staff members in conservation areas. This was a training for the staff in Tepisque Conservation, and this was a training for staffs in conservation at an Tepisque area, which is the two areas in each margin of the Tepisque River. This is very important because these people do the effort to buy their own equipment and tools, and we also train them for them to learn how to do use their tools so that they can measure and do samples from the river frequently. We wanted to finish with this image of the Tepisque River. And you observed in these images that it also belongs to our students and our youth and everyone in Guanacaste. It's very important to see that from HydroSec, from the National University in Guanacaste, we have been determining several problems that are fundamental in the riverbed, which is 65 and 70% of the territory of the Chorotega region. And it has a lot of problems, of course, and that's why we are collaborating each time more and involving more institutions and sectors. Because in Sijitem, there's also different sectors, like the private sector, which is the old stakeholder in the riverbed, but we want more so that we can make this monitoring sustainable throughout time through the commission that Joanna was talking about, and in which Kirsten Gulcher also participates as a representative from the university, and we look to have sponsors of different points of sampling so that we can continue with the monitoring throughout time, and that is how we are working in the National System for Conservation with the Director Rodney Piedra to see how we can continue providing sustainability to these efforts. Now, following this presentation, we're going to have the Engineering Biotechnology, Annie Jane Watson. She also works in HydroSec. She is the coordinator of microbiology, environmental microbiology. She has a master's in management of natural resources and technology for production. She works in HydroSec since 2016, where she develops research, extension, and teaching. In her work, she has worked on the biological control for insects, molecular biology, plant virology, water samples, bio research for secondary resources, and she's with HydroSec with us today. She's going to present about the quality of the coastal water, the importance of the monitoring for better environmental management. Thank you very much. Thank you for that presentation. I will comment a little about what we mean by the quality of the coastal waters, but not just the quality, but the importance of the monitoring to do a better management and a better management of the water resources. Of course, now to start talking about the quality of the water in the ocean, it is necessary for us to understand what are we referring to as coastal waters. Waters from the coast are an interaction, or we find them in the extreme and the border of the continents, and that are related directly with the oceans. So it is that interaction that we have out there. Why is it important, and why is the interaction that we have in this dynamic between the coast and the oceans? Well, one of the important interactions is this that we see here. For example, what happens in the estuaries? It is the combination of the river waters with salt waters out there in the ocean. And that's where we get the whole majority of pollution and contaminants that come to the coast, and we have all these problems. What other interactions can we observe as affected and that interact? And that have this interaction with the coast? This one. Loads, downloads that are directly in this ocean. For example, this submarine that transports treated water, the residual waters, wastewaters, it recovers a lot of distance and they get into the ocean so that they can break down in the ocean. Another interaction that we can see, this one that we have here, just like the estuaries. Same interaction. They go through different systems in rural areas and they finish off in the coast. Another is the different draining systems that we have in the beaches. So all these interactions affect what we know as coastal waters. But importantly, why do we think that the habitat in the coast is important? It is very productive and it's very rich. We can find a big diversity of species, just like fish and different other animals. Also, it provides resources and productive and ecosystem services. For example, in this image that we have out here, we have a water wetland. The wetland is part of the coast, and it has different systems or even different ecosystem services. For example, in the case of the mangrove, it is one of the main sources of capturing CO2. So it helps us mitigate the climate change. It is the first defense line as well against hurricanes that now are more frequent because of what climate change means. But all these ecosystem services have been affected by anthropogenic activities, which means that it's the activities that we as human beings have developed. That's why it's so important for us to be clear about these three concepts. The interconnected environments. In the coast, different to the continental part and region, we understand that there's no defined limit unless we have a GPS. That it makes it difficult that on ground we have rivers that separate continents, or rather provinces or even countries. In the coast we don't have that, so it makes it more difficult whenever we are going to manage these waters because there's no limit that is very well defined. The same way, the primary productiveness. If we have productivity in the water, there's more ecosystems and more diversity that are going to be present if there's more productiveness. Now, what's difficult is that this moves because of the streams and tides and the dynamic of the ocean. When we have this mobility because of the tides, all ecosystems also We observe fish and other organisms that are going to transport themselves and move to take advantage of the resources. But what makes it difficult is if we have high risk species for extinction, we can manage that resource better. And lastly, the one from before, this one, which is very important. The ground environment and the oceanic environment are intimately related. All those activities that we do on the ground are going to be affected directly in the ocean. What are some of these factors that can affect the coastal waters? First is agricultural pollution. So pollution originated from this practice. Joanna explained, which is all those activities that are done in the margin of the river, at the one side of the river, specifically Tempisque River, that affect, because their activity goes directly to the river, and with the river they get to the mouth of the river, which gets to the Gulf of Nicoya, which is the Tempisque River, and that happens with all the rivers in the world. Now or later, they're going to end up in the mouth of some rivers, so that is why it's so important the measurements of pesticides and other pollutants. Other factors are industrial pollution. These are loads of pollution that can come from different sources, especially heavy metals. In this image that we have here is a news outlet that was done last year, where you can see mentioned that there was some research done to determine different metals in the coast of Colombia. The detail and the finding was arsenic, mercury, and others in these coasts. Not only found, but rather they saw some kind of ecological affectation and detrimental condition in the oysters where we found this metal deposits. So not only there's a presence and affectation on the ecosystem, but there's also an economical problem here. Why? Well, because the harvesting of oysters is done to process maniculture, and some families in the area, they sell these products and handcrafts to be able to survive. So there's already an affectation in the ecosystem, but also in the activities of human beings.
Another of the factors that affect and influence the contamination is emerging pollution or contaminants, because this means that maybe the causes aren't new, but they are just now being determined. What are the real affections that these products cause? One of them, for example, is solar protection. When we go to the beach, we fill up, we completely slate our skin with solar protection, and then this goes into the water, and there are some studies that are following this that see the affection that this has on marine life. And then another example of these emerging contaminants that we have mentioned a lot are microplastics. So we already know the different issues that this have caused. And then the last one is urban residue from wastewater, and these waters, these contaminants, affect directly on the health of people. So if that is detected, bacteria, some viruses, products of this wastewater, then the beach is completely closed out. There can't be a direct contact with these type of contaminants. And then we also see the plastics. There are five islands, hydro islands with plastic waste, and that all have origins on coast. And what are the factors of all of these issues that we have mentioned? There is a bio that they are affected, and that will go up in the chain and affect us as well. So we can't only think that that will affect the ecosystem, but it will also reach us due to the normal natural chain. Okay, so I've mentioned the different effects, and what can we do with this? We can monitor the quality of water. There are three different techniques to monitor that. First one is traditional techniques, which is basically just going to the field, collecting samples, taking them to the laboratory, and just lead them through the normal process. The other one is utilizing advanced technology, maybe different boats or near coast, and using sensors on site and using different parameters, physical, chemical. And within these technologies, we've also used satellite imaging, and another colleague will speak further on that. And the advantage of these technologies is that they provide a larger coverage, to have a larger control, not of just of one area, but of a larger area, a larger space. Example, the monitoring of the red tides. Okay, and then also when we have the economical resources, the technologies, we can also set up monitoring networks using ships, and they have large sensors, and they can really just monitor large areas, and we can determine how it's affected. And then also tide monitoring as well, to establish if there's a contamination and where that's going to, where that's flowing. Now I will speak briefly on three cases that we have led in Hidrosec in different years. In these cases, we have had different monitoring within different parameters, but I will focus only in the microbiological results so that we can cover it all. The first is the study that was led from 2017 to 2019, and it was in the Gulf of Papagayo. And there was monitoring of the sea and then also the coast. I will focus on the portion of the coast, and what we did was go to several different areas that were selected. We would obtain samples on site and take that to the laboratory, to the lab, and process the samples. And then in a microbiological, we were able to determine bacteria Escherichia coli, Ephico coli, and some fecal elements as well. And then we were able to see that in most cases, it was under the limits that are established. And I will go into detail later on with that. But there are some events, for example, here in June, that were over the limit of what was detected. In the case of Enterococcus, it was determined that it wasn't even possible to have that beach open for recreation. And then there was another one from oh no, that one was from 2017 to 2018. I'm sorry. This we still need to speak about the conclusions. Okay, so we were able to determine that the concentration of these bacteria and different issues that I indicated was that they were present during the rainy season. That means that during the rainy season, there was kind of a flow of these contaminants. They were dragged into the ocean, and it was determined that in 2011 there was the quality of water diminished in comparison to the study in 2011. And then, okay, this is the second study, October 22nd and November 2023. These were the evaluation of anthropogenic pressures in Santa Cruz. And there is a larger concentration of tourists there. And then we also obtained samples on site. Different samples were obtained, and we went to the lab. And then the preliminary results was that in Tamarindo, the beach, there is a higher incidence of bacteria Escherichia coli. And that's interesting because when we see the drainage or the overflow of different discharges, in Tamarindo there were over 20 discharges in the estuary. And that's in the in the Nicoya Gulf. And then the third case is the strengthening of the mariculture. When we see the Rio Tempisque, there are different dynamics that all flow into the Nicoya Gulf. And then in the Gulf of the Nicoya Gulf, due to climate change, the fish farming that was dealt with there previously needs to be diminished. And then there are other cultures, different farmings, such as this mariculture, that have different conditions. So then we see that all of the discharges that ultimately came up to the Nicoya Gulf affected this farming, and therefore this study of the variation of the environment. And so then for this study, we had different studies, different samples. We had different oyster farming, and very close there was an association for the oyster farming. So same thing, we obtained samples, we took those to the lab, we looked into the results, and in this first campaign, what we were able to obtain was that for this campaign, this happened during a tide. Why? Because it's important to understand where these conditions are coming from. So when we analyze these results, we see a higher incidency in the lower tide. And so then that means that where there's a low tide, there's a larger discharge of contaminants from the Tempisque to the Gulf. So we see how there are different effects. And then challenges and opportunities that we found. I didn't mention, because there's a lot of detail here that needs to be done for these campaigns of monitoring, but we do need specialized equipment, staff, logistics, especially if we're dealing with different institutions and so forth. So there is a challenge that um, comes from whatever comes from the coast all the way to the ocean, and we need to see where that is coming from. In conclusion, yes, there is continuous monitoring is crucial, frequent, and for us to employ the results and not only concentrate the study in one area, but try to amplify that because that will help us to have a better vision. And we also need to adopt advanced technologies. We need cooperations with other institutions, whether that be from the government or NGOs. And we need to support each other to provide a better monitoring, and we need to understand the different data that we have acquired is important for us to also take into account for political decisions as well. And then also to establish the action plan, a very clear action plan of what we're doing, how we need this, and what we can do to develop that. And very important to finish the citizen participation. It's important, as Christian indicated, to involve the citizens because sometimes we don't have the resources to go ahead and provide these monitoring. And who is mostly affected? Locals, the people that work there, so and that live there, so they can help, and they have access to this water in a more frequent way, instead us that maybe once every 15 days, if that even is possible. So the citizen participation is very important, and then the training with these workshops, the motivation, and also for us to have specifications as to what is needed is very important. I want to finish with this insight that says we have the responsibility and the commitment of mankind to continue prospering in a sustainable way, because we don't have the capacity to exist without these resources, but we have the responsibility to develop all of these activities in a sustainable way. Thank you. Thank you, Annie. And yes, that is the challenge. That is why we are here to deal with that very great challenge to reach a sustainable ocean. And if we don't act quickly, whether that be in what we can participate and also political influence, that's something that needs to be dealt with quickly. We can't just turn our backs and just deal with oceans and rivers only when we go on vacation. It's very important for the benefit of all humankind. Now we will open a space for questions for our first three presenters, and if you agree, if somebody wants to go grab coffee, there we have some coffee just outside, and we can also have some coffee, and we can also just drink coffee while we deal with questions, and then we can continue with the presentations. Does anyone have a question? Okay, Alex. Yes, hello, my name is Alexander County. I will also speak with the Ocean Project in a bit. The presentations are very interesting, and I was specifically touched by the project of Christian Gocher, especially in the participation of the citizens, of locals, and I think that's very relevant and very practical in a world where we always say we don't have data, we don't have information. And I also think it's interesting that he said that the missing data, that's always an issue, but also to generate a bit of a debate about the reality here in Costa Rica, and then also of your own experience as to if it's an availability issue for data, or if it's an access issue. So maybe we can speak a little bit about that. Also, to understand the importance of using data and how we can use that, how we can integrate that within different institutions. That I can say from my own experience has been a really great challenge, and also to listen to your experiences in regards to that, and just basically thank you for the projects that all of you lead. It's very important, especially in the Tempisque River. Yes, would you like to respond something here? Yes, thank you for the observation and really the issue of access and availability of data, and what are the data that we obtain in hydrology. What we've seen is that there are different actors that generate some data. So what we have is some data that are distributed within a framework of competition of different institutions. So, for example, the Weather Institute in Costa Rica, and then we have the Electrical Institute in Costa Rica, or the Aqueduct and Sewage System in Costa Rica, and then the universities also have their efforts. And then we also have the Direction of Water for the Ministry of the Environment, which even has tried to set up an integrated system, a national system, to for hydric data, which I think it's important effort to try and see how we can centralize the information and have that be something that everyone has access to. And I think that's something that's important that has been led. Ever since I started my master's, I saw that challenge to try to access that information. We need forms and permits just for data for a small portion of period, and then even that took like 6 months to get to me. And anyhow, there really isn't a lot of information, a lot of data, and in hydrology we need a lot of information. There's a lot of remote information as well but in general we always need a lot of data, and we have a competition also with the so-called developed countries, and then the other countries that are so-called underdeveloped countries. So we have sometimes hundreds of years to monitoring their basins, their rivers. And in Europe, sometimes it's like only 100 years for different water bodies. And in Costa Rica, that hasn't become our reality. So now we have the obligation to try and obtain all of the resources that we can obtain, and those resources are the exact same people in the communities that have interest, motivation. They want to participate in these different procedures, processes, but they don't know how to. So I feel that's what we need to establish. We need to establish protocols that can be accessed by a group of people so they can collect this information. And these information will also go into a database, and that will be managed by another actor. So I think we need to create regional observatories, or to upload them into national databases. So that's kind of a challenge that the entire country still has. Then on the national level, we also have another institute that has an important database for territory, different geographical phenomena that are important, but we still need a lot of information in water.
Just to add on it, this topic is very important for me. And for example, in the Huacasta Marindo water body, when we went to the beach there, and we saw that in the framework of another project, which was an international project with the support of IHE students that they did some numeric modeling of the water body because we had support from Senada. Senada has done a lot of water studies there. One of the water bodies that has been more studied in Guanacaste. But when we were doing the model, we were asking ourselves because we were collecting all the information that there's data, and I say it precisely because it's what we're speaking about. That there's data from the water beds there. No, there isn't. And when it's dry season, they're dry, and we don't know. And we can see that very well. We have these ideas that the citizens' participation can generate within the protocols that we've been working on from the AUKUS project. We have the monitoring of the riverbed and how people can learn to do these measurements. There's also a job being done at the level of community while generating the micro riverbed as well. Something that is so well studied in the part that is not always like that, but in the hydrogeological aspect. But in the surface, we don't have any data, so we have to end up building that whole puzzle. Any other question? I'm Jose Maria, a student from hydrological career. Teacher, I have a question. What is the position of private companies in this, in regards of this research in the river? Because they are pointed at being the main pollutants, responsible people of the rivers. What do they think about it? Well, thank you for that question. Very controversial. We really do not point, and we cannot say specifically that you are the one polluting, right? We cannot blame anybody, like making anybody responsible unless you see that discharge being directly happening and disposed. But for fertilizers and pollutants, these are diffuse pollutants that it's difficult to understand where that pollution is coming from. So these companies that are surrounding the river, they do some kind of effort. We have to recognize that companies do this effort. They have organic agriculture now and different programs being applied where companies do their own efforts so that they can help conservation. Even now, we are proposing a project that is called Padrinos del Tempisque, or Godfathers of Tempisque River. That is basically to ask for economical support for companies, these companies, so that each company can be a godfather of a single point of monitoring. And in that way, the company can identify with what we're doing, the importance of monitoring, and that we don't pollute the river. That's why alliances is important, not only for them to finance these, but also to sensibilize the fact that the good practices in agriculture can change. And that is what we have to work on at the level of the riverbed, the river in general. Any other questions so far? Any other comment? Come on. My name is Gloria Navarro, the teacher from Juan Carlos University in Spain. I've liked the three presentations a lot. Very relevant. Christians of the citizen participation. I'm going to talk a little about it as well, which is pretty good to link it to it, the equality as well. I'm gonna do a comment related to something that Annie has commented, which is very interesting that we cannot forget about, that coastal areas are very affected by all the anthropogenic pollutants from the rivers or the ground. And a concrete case in Spain, which is the Mar Menor or the Minor Ocean. This is caused, some pollution caused by agriculture mainly. Agriculture is over that area in Spain. It has it has actually affected a whole ecosystem in Spain. There's a model of agriculture for many years, and we have pointed towards them. We actually there's a lot of controversy because we have pointed on them, and there has been massive affectation of the ecosystem. The whole ecosystem has changed irreversibly. So it has changed dramatically. And about this, I wanted to comment something that for me has been remarkable, because there has been citizens movement that is very strong. In Spain, it's been one of the strongest ones that we had, and we requested a popular legislative initiative where we do a petition to Congress or a request for Congress. It was signed by 500,000 people. We collected signatures, and at the end, we assigned a juridical representation or a legal representation for the minor ocean. It has an entity, as if it was a person, a legal person, and it can sue people that have polluted them. So this is something that I'm bringing out here because it could be a path. In America, there's a lot of initiatives of ILPs, of the juridical and legal representation. In Europe, it's been the first one, and it's a whole process that we can start to sue. And minor ocean will go to court and will sue the people that have been polluting. This is very recent. We'll see how that goes. And I just wanted to comment that, which is interesting and applicable to other countries. Thank you. Thank you, Nuria. Exactly. In Costa Rica, we have important mechanisms of the management of water that generates resource for the environmental ministry. For example, the slogan that says, whoever pollutes pays for it. We have that in Costa Rica. Then the kind of taking advantage. For many years, we have collected financial mechanisms, and up to very few years ago, we've been able to collect those water resources, but people don't know about it, and they don't know how to use these legal powers so that they can benefit their communities and the ecosystems. So, what if we continue, or should we do a pause so that we can go out to the restroom for about 10 minutes and let's go back, alright? Let's go for some coffee, and we will come back in about 10 minutes. Thank you, everyone.
otras tres presentaciones que son muy interesantes y son de nuestros
Bien,
invitados
va a ser 10.
especiales, nacionales e
Alright, we're gonna
internacionales.
come back and we're gonna hear from our international national speakers that are
Ya
in
vamos a
this
iniciar.
room today.
A
We're about to
continuación,
begin,
vamos a
and
tener la participación
now we're going to have the
de
participation
Navarro.
of Nuria
Ella
Navarro.
es doctora en
She
ciencias del mar
is
y
doctor in
profesora titular
sciences
en el área
in the
de
ocean
biodiversidad y
and
conservación de la Universidad del Rey Juan
biodiversity and
Carlos
conservation
de
in the
Madrid,
University of
España.
Rey Juan
Es
Carlos in
investigadora del
Madrid,
Instituto de
Spain.
Investigación
She's
en
researcher
Cambio Global y
global
coordinadora del grupo de
change and
investigación
coordinator
en
of the
zonas
research
costeras y
group in
marinas
coastal areas and
Socomar.
marine areas, Socomar.
Su trayectoria investigadora se ha
Her
centrado en el
work
estudio de las
has
comunidades
been centered in the
planctónicas,
study
así como
of
de los
the
parámetros
planktonic
ambientales del agua,
communities and also the
reconociendo la
environmental aspects
importancia
of
del
water,
campo como un
recognizing the
indicador
importance of plankton
biológico
as an biological
y
indicator,
su contribución en los
and her
ciclos
contribution
biogeoquímicos
of
globales
biochemical
y su potencial en la
global
mitigación del
indicators,
cambio climático a través del
the
secuestro
mitigation
de
of
carbono. Además,
climate
trabaja en
change
estudios
through
de
the
gestión costera y servicios ecosistémicos,
fixation of
estudiando
carbon.
la
She
vulnerabilidad
also
de las
studies the
zonas costeras
vulnerability
frente
of
al
coastal
cambio
areas
climático,
in
así
climate
como los
change,
impactos
also the impact of
antropogénicos.
anthropogenic
Invitamos a Nuria
impact
para que
as well
haga,
in the world. Let's hear
su
from Nuria so
presentación
that she
sobre
can do her
valoración de la
presentation
calidad
about
del
the
agua de cuencas
quality
hidrográficas
of
con la
water from
participación de las
water
comunidades
bodies
y
and the
escuelas
participation
rurales.
of communities and rural schools.
Muchas gracias. Pues nada, lo primero es
Thank you very much. So first of all, I want to thank Andrea, who has invited me to participate in this event. I'm very happy of being here again in Costa Rica.
Y bueno, pues
And
vamos a pasar a explicar la presentación.
we're going to explain the
¿Cuál es la
presentation. What is the
justificación de
justification
esta
and the
charla?
background of this
Las
talk?
presentaciones
As we've
anteriores,
seen on
ya todos
presentations
hemos
from
conocido
before,
que
we are
la mayoría,
very
por
well
decir
aware that
todas,
the majority
las hidrográficas están
of the
contaminadas.
water bodies are polluted.
El origen de estos contaminantes
The
proviene
origin
de
of these
productos
pollutants,
variados,
as we've
siempre
seen,
de
is
origen
different, always
antropogénico,
anthropogenic
por
and
agricultura,
varied sources.
pesticidas,
It could be
fertilizantes,
agriculture
etcétera,
with fertilizers,
contaminantes
pesticides,
emergentes como
etc.,
antibióticos y
emerging
fármacos,
pollutants like
compuestos de
antibiotics
origen
and
orgánico, aquí estarían todos los plásticos,
drugs and medicine.
excesos de nutrientes, todo lo
Also nutrients, everything related to fixation. And we can also have microorganisms and pathogens pollution. This is what I'm going to be focused on because
tenemos contaminación de origen fecal, que podría ser las bacterias Escherichia coli
source
o bacterias
sourced
coliformes
pollution like
intolerantes,
bacteria,
que
like E.
son las
coli,
principales
which are the
causantes
main
de enfermedades
causes of
diarreicas.
diarrhea,
Esto
for
tiene una
example.
grave repercusión en la
This has a
salud,
repercussion
dado que es la principal
and
causa de
an
mortalidad
affectation on
infantil en el mundo.
the health.
Según la Organización
Because
Mundial de la Salud,
it
se
affects
reportan cada año
infants,
1.700 millones
about
de casos,
1,700 million cases,
algo más de
from
medio
which
millón de niños menores de
more than
5
half a
años
million of
mueren por esta causa.
youngsters
Teniendo en
die
cuenta
because of
esto,
this condition.
tenemos también que esta contaminación no solo
Younger
afecta
than
como
5 years
dicho,
old,
como
and it
bien
not
ha
only affects,
explicado
as
Estefania,
we've
no solo
seen,
afecta a los ecosistemas
as it has been
colindantes,
explained
sino que
before,
todo esto va a llegar a las
that
zonas costeras.
all of this is going to get to the
eventualmente a los
coasts,
océanos. Por eso
eventually
no
to the
podemos
ocean.
separar
That's why we cannot
cuando
separate
investigamos,
when we
zonas
do
costeras
some
o
research on
océanos,
coastal
no
areas
podemos separarlos de
or
los
oceans. We
aportes
cannot
de
separate it
nuestros
from
terrestres.
the
Una vez
activities
vista la
on the ground.
problemática, hemos planteado
Once
un
we
serie de
understand the
proyectos y
problematic, we
colaboraciones
have projects and
y teniendo
collaborations
en
in
cuenta
place and taking into
estos
account
tres parámetros.
these three
¿Qué
different
podemos hacer
parameters.
para evitar
What
o
can we do
intentar
to
mitigar esta
avoid and mitigate
contaminación
this
de los océanos?
pollution in
Una parte muy
the
importante,
riverbeds?
una
An important
caracterización
aspect,
ambiental, que es lo que
environmental
se está haciendo, ¿no?
characterization, which is what we are already doing with
Pero, como bien ha indicado
traditional
antes
sampling.
Christian, tenemos
But as
el-
Christian has
ahí
indicated
el
before,
problema de que no
we have
tenemos
the problem that we
suficientes
don't
datos,
have either
y a veces no existe
enough
la
data and
capacidad
sometimes we don't have the
tecnológica para
technological
realizar
capacity to
científica
do
o de
it
capacitación.
or the training
Esto es especialmente
necessary for
relevante
it. This
en el
is
caso
relevant
de
in the
los
case
análisis
of the
microbiológicos, que tienen
microbiological studies,
un componente importante,
which have an
son
important component.
análisis caros,
These are
los
expensive analysis
reproductivos, los kits
because
bien
of
preparados son bastante caros,
the samples and the kits that are very
de
expensive,
personal
and
especializado,
also
que
the
tener un
specialized
laboratorio
personnel
también,
and having a lab in place
con cierto material también
with
bastante
materials
caro.
and tools
Son
that
análisis
are very
complicados de
expensive.
realizar. Realmente no
These
se
are
pueden
very
hacer.
hard.
Viendo esta problemática, nos planteamos
So understanding the
poder
problem, we
abaratar y
then
simplificar este
try to
tipo de análisis.
understand
Hacerlo de forma
this
mucho
type
más
of
accesible,
analysis and do
que ha
it,
sido una parte importante del proyecto.
make it more accessible, which is
Otra
an
parte
important
del
part of
mismo
the
viene
project. Also, this is related to Kristen's presentation with an hydrical water education in schools, the importance of taking care of the rivers and the pollution, and also training workshops in communities. This training programs is about training scientifically to be able to capture data from these riverbeds. In this aspect, everything is going to help us to get close to the goals of sustainable development. 6, which is make water available and the sustainable management, and 14, which is preserving and conserving in a sustainable manner the water bodies. Those 3 aspects that we just touched upon are linked with something very important, which is citizen science, such as training communities so they can take scientific data and getting to know the medium. For example, water bodies in this case. There are several concepts that I want to present to you. One of them is the environmental subsidiarity. What does this mean? It is that the responsibility of conserving and preserving nature, it belongs to everyone, and the responsibility is also held by governments and legislative bodies. But the only ones that can do an effective change in a territory is the people that live in it and that use it. This concept, what it says is about decentralizing its management so that it can be part of the owners of the terrain and the land where this happens. This exists in Spain, and each time we're using it more, which is the custody of the territory. And this means that the users of a territory are responsible for the conservation and use of the natural resources, cultural and sightseeing places where in the territory where they live. How do they do it? Formalizing what we call the custody entities. These entities can be public or private, or mixed. These are the entities that are formed based on the legislation, and these are in charge of protecting a territory where they live. It could be small, it could be a parcel, it could be watershed, a little area around the community, but they are the ones responsible to manage the territory. It is an interesting topic that right there, and now, to understand what we're talking about, we have initiated several cooperations and collaborations in organizations and institutions where we share the same interest and worry. We started working in Dominican Republic with the Autonomous University in Santo Domingo and the National Institute for Water Resources. We have also worked in Honduras with the National Autonomous University in Honduras, and since last year in Costa Rica with the members from National University and Hidrosec, and they're here. It's kind of stuck, so we're waiting. So carrying on to answer to the problems that we identified, we have identified three goals. Firstly, the environmental training about and information about the water bodies and the collection of data while implementing a simple and accessible methodology. With this, we did some tests in the lab and we used the metabolic conditions of the bacteria, which are the fermentators, and during this fermentation they produce acid. So we used mediums with lactose and we used milk for this, and we noticed that whenever there was fecal bacteria, they used the medium of lactose to produce acid, and there was some coagulation in milk that was visible physically. So during a period of incubation of 24 hours to the adequate temperature of this bacteria, which is 37 and 44 degrees. In a simple manner, therefore, we could see the presence of these bacteria. It's very simple, it's not quantifiable, but we can detect if there is the presence of this bacteria, which cause the diarrhea syndrome, which affects children mainly. So it affects children. We did several tests in the lab with adequate conditions between water and milk so that we can see the results. We also did tests to find out the minimum amount of bacteria that we could detect, and it was very interesting. Per milliliter for 10,000 cells, which is not a lot, although it sounds like it, this method was able to detect the presence of them. The second goal was the empowerment of communities to be able to take care of their rivers. So we implemented several workshops in the associations that in a way are present in the management of water bodies in Dominican Republic, in Vigilantes del Agua, the units in for water in Honduras, and Asadas in Costa Rica. Goal number 3 is the water education. So it's about carrying workshops for education and training in the communities and schools. We're going to start with Dominican Republic as an example. We started working on 2019 with them. We knew representatives from INDRI that came to our university to tell us about the program that they had and the problematic quality of water was a project that we started implementing. I believe it was 2017 or 18. And we grouped a series of volunteers in all communities, and we would train them to monitor the courses of water in the area that they lived in. And the physical chemical parameters for this, we had this sampling kit that had a pH meter for temperature and DBO, and also a microbiology kit. This is where we had the issue. For microbiology, that started working, but whenever it stopped working because of its high price, we didn't use another one. They contacted us to see how we could solve the issue, and that's when we started thinking about simpler methods. This was the beginning of it. These volunteers, once we committed to measure the quality of water in the rivers that they lived in, it had an application in their phone mobiles, in their phones, called EpiCollect. It would capture data, it would send it to them, and the Institute INDRI would see real-time all this data. Which one? Well, it was a system that was very effective of collecting data with all communities.
But this has stopped working mainly because the kit components were lost. Okay, I will begin showing a series of pictures so I can illustrate. We took a trip to help in this area, to Puerto Escondido. That's in the National Park of Mauruco. That's very close to the border with Haiti. with
Es una
Haiti.
comunidad rural
That is
que
a
vive al
rural
lado
community
de la cuenca del río Damas
that has a basin
y iniciamos un
close
taller también
by,
con la gente de
and
la
we
comunidad. En
started
este
a
caso, los
workshop with
voluntarios
the
puede ser
people of the
una gente que
community,
sea un poco cristiana,
and the
cualquier persona de la
volunteers,
comunidad.
as Christian
No,
mentioned, can really be
no,
anyone.
no había una
Anyone from
organización
the
previamente
community. There
formada.
wasn't a
Todo el mundo que
previous
estuviera interesante
organization.
podía acudir a este taller y
Anyone who
conformarse
wanted to
como vigilantes
participate
del agua. Les daban
could
carnet,
participate
etcétera.
and
Íbamos
become
a
a
taller.
water
También acudían a las
vigilant.
escuelas.
And
Y
we also went
juntamos
to
las
the
dos
schools,
partes,
so
¿no?
we kind of mixed
Talleres a
both
la
things,
comunidad y educación libre.
community workshop
Hicimos un
and
taller de formación
these
teórico
workshops
y
at
luego pasamos
schools.
a la parte práctica en el
So we started with a
río
theoretical
Damas.
portion, and then we went to the
Empezamos a
practical
vocear
one. We
desde
went
las
to the river,
nacientes hasta, bueno, una parte que termina cerca de, bueno, pues, el
and
estanque con
we
la
went
gente.
to the
La
different
realidad que se
springs,
encuentra es
and
que,
then we went to a different portion of the
sospechábamos,
river.
comprobamos
And we
que había
suspected, but we were able to
porque
confirm
íbamos
that there was a lot of
cerca del
fecal
río sin
pollutants.
saneamiento, tanto de población de
There were
Honduras,
several
tanto de población indígena como de
riverbeds
Haití.
near
También había
near the river
ganado
that had no type of sanitation. There was plenty of cattle that was just loose, and they used to use that water to drink, which is a very strong issue. They used that water to drink and to wash, to bathe. And so after the theoretical portion of the workshop, we went and did the sampling, and the children also helped, children and adults. And near the end, this is a sort of tank, a pond that had agriculture there in the basin, and we also took this sampling because they don't have an incubation tent, a stove, so we improvised with a refrigerator. We put a light bulb, and it actually worked amazing. With $40 or $50, we actually even did more than we thought. It worked really well. This is a light bulb that regulates the intensity. When it's around 37, 38, you stop at the intensity there, then you close the refrigerator there, and it works like a stove for the incubation of sampling. And then we saw in all sampling, really, there was a presence of Escherichia coli, of different bacteria. Okay, and so then these analyses, we evaluated them with the community, and that was the question. Can we drink this? Can we drink this river water? And the answer is no. We didn't tell them that. They reached that conclusion. And I feel that's really the way we should deal with these things, because if you see an analysis, water analysis, and the person themselves decide, no, this isn't water that I should be drinking, I shouldn't be bathing in this water. So there was a commitment from the community to continue monitoring the water analysis regularly. And with this, we see that the scientific knowledge empowers communities and enables them to make decisions. In Honduras, we began working there in 2021, and with the same objectives as the previous studies, environment, characterization. We started working in the river basin in the north of Honduras, and then 3 other rivers, Highland Creek River. Here, that would be the basin for the Banaderos River, and then There's another river near the east, which is the Cangrejal River. We went ahead with workshops there. Different communities that now are in charge of the hydric resources in their communities, and then also workshops at schools. And then for the results, we see the environment characteristic. We see regular scientific analysis with different methodology, simple, economical. We see the flow, the pH, the nutrients, and we show the community how to do this. And then this one here is what we did with them, with the methodology that I indicated previously. Here we have other students where we can see that in Honduras, there are several students that are in their last year, and so then they come and we provide a training, and then we send them during the summer to lead these trainings. I will go a little bit quicker. So what we've seen now is that all of the riverbeds, all of the basins are contaminated, are polluted. And if you see the blue bars here, that's Escherichia coli, that's bacteria. There should be none. And in all cases, in all samples, they were present. And that's where the river flows, in the coast. And there are beaches there. A lot of beaches, a lot of tourists, and they are bathing there where the river flows that is very much polluted with this bacteria. You could move ahead. This is the Rio Bañadero River basin, and they are also contaminated. They're also polluted, and we see here a protected area. There's barely communities there, and yet we were able to determine, and it was present in the samples, this bacteria as well. We have some pictures here. Seeing this challenge, we started training the communities so that they could see what the issue was and for them to get involved. And here, the hydric education at school. We have all the kids here going to the river to obtain samples, to evaluate the hydric system in general. And this was last year. In Riva, they're older students. So we start here with even kids in just like primary school all the way to high school. And then we started a cooperation, a spectacular cooperation here with our colleagues in HydroSec. We took very specific samples. And what we did here was very simple because all we did was incorporate ourselves to the workshop that they already provide. They provide a workshop called Aqua Lab, so we just integrated into that and worked with them in the workshop, and that's they carry on with everything we've seen so far. And then they also determine the quality of the water. And here's a small video that I would like to share, I would like to show. It's really nice. Here they are going ahead with the samples. The girls are to see if they are any bacteria.
Una escuela unida, gente.
This was a school for Inogente. This reminds me of Andrea. Here they measure the velocity of the water, the flow, with a small duck. The duck was kind of the hero of this workshop. It was quite fun. Joanna's there kind of cheering on. And then they are there with the microscopes to measure the rainfall. Schools do this, and here we're kind of sharing with them a theoretical portion of water, and then a small diploma as well because they participated. And then I will move ahead with the conclusions. Okay. So the conclusion is that all of the basins are polluted with bacteria of fecal origin, which is the Escherichia coli, and that all reaches the coast where the river flows, altering marine habits. We have developed simple methodologies, economical, that allows detection of these type of bacteria, the coliform bacteria. And we were able to see that with all of these procedures, we reached the same conclusion, that it was polluted, that we couldn't drink it. And even with a simple method, we see that there's a small precision, but it's simple, you can replicate it, it's educational, subsidiary, and participant. It allows the participation of others, and this empowers communities. And with these workshops, we are able to transmit knowledge of criteria of water quality, and there has been great participation and interest. They are always asking us to repeat these workshops, and I think this is something that we all need to take note of, because this strengthens the responsibility of the community, and they can avoid fecal pollutants for the rivers, and also environmental subsidies, and to decentralize the management of the hydric resources, and for the community to start managing their quality of water through scientific knowledge. And so then we see that they're able to obtain fluvial ecosystems and in coast in optimal state. Thank you. Super interesting, Nuria. Thank you so much for your presentation and for your insights in this conversation. And now we will listen to Dr. Calvi. He's a doctor in hydrology with over 20 years of experience for sustainability of water resources in Costa Rica, Chile, Angola, many countries. And he has a intersectoral collaboration for the development of a detection service and monitoring of the red tide in the Pacific, the Costa Rican Pacific coast. And also Dr. County with a presentation for this development of this detection and monitoring. Thank you, Andrea, for the introduction, for the presentation. Okay, so we've spoken a lot about the problem of water quality, and I will speak a little bit about the red tide. The issue with the red tide began since 2012 in the country. In And in 2022, there was an event, an intense event in almost all of the Pacific coast in Costa Rica. It was a very grave event, something unprecedented, and that motivated this project that is called Mares, Oceans, that you can see here. And it's an acronym that means monitoring algae blooms using mode sensing. And going back to the challenge that we faced in 2022, it was a very big impact in tourism, in fishing, in health, also in the environment and in the tourist section. In the Papagayo Peninsula, we can kind of calculate a loss of $1 million. In fishing, we lost a lot of commercial products, health, a lot of skin irritation, intoxication, and in the environment, death of marine life and loss of conservation. In fact, the impact, we can see it in those 4 sectors, and we will see this a little bit further on. We can see it as an opportunity rather than a problem, an opportunity for a solution, for mitigation for this issue. Because the question is when, where, and with what intensity this will come back, and how can we mitigate its impact. Some reviews in social networks. The tourists want to know where should they go, and even locals want to know where can we go, where's a clean beach. And so our question is, where can we go? Where is there a clean beach, where there is a good quality of water? So we can see that the relevance of this project to people, not only in the scientific level, but also institutionally, and people who have their own businesses near the beach or have fishing activities, news, and different advertisement. We see here of a ban, and we can see here that there was an integration of different sectors to prohibit the fishing of different marine animals to avoid intoxication. And here near the end of 2021, there was an alert here where they indicated that we should not eat mollusks. And for this project, Mares, this is financed by the Dutch government through a fund that's called Partners for Water. And thanks to that fund, we began in July 2023. We have a year in this project, and we've been quite successful to obtain measurements through four information sources. And basically, we want to reach a solution. We want to provide a solution. The users for fishing, tourism, environment, health, so that we can monitor collectively this phenomenon in the ocean. A service of detection and monitoring based on satellite data and local measurements that provides maps and alerts, early alerts for the red tide, and to provide mitigation.
This is a picture summarizing The methodology that we think at the beginning, we thought at the beginning, it was actually before the beginning of the project that we tried to understand what we were going to do, starting with three different partners in the company that I work at. We have an engineering and science, HydroSec, National University, and a Dutch water insight company. It's two of us working at the beginning. So we would say, how would we organize all this? And of course, one of them, because of their broad experience in Guanacaste, also with their contacts and the experience with monitoring and water quality, that was a strategic partner and very important one. And Water Insight, this company from the Netherlands has been using teledetection technology in South Africa and Europe in different projects, and it's an important ally. So that we can also understand and learn about this type of technologies, what the scope is and their benefits. As a county in this specific project, I'm a hydrologist, but in this particular project, I'm also a facilitator, so that things flow. My task is basically overseeing the organization so that we can go and monitor, so that we can collect data correctly, so that we can have the monthly meetings and organize ourselves. And during the project, I myself have learned a lot, that the quality of the water was something that I was very interested in. And for a long time I wanted to learn about this phenomenon that impacted me a lot. Well, the tides and the effect that they can have nationally, internationally as well in these four sectors that I mentioned. And of course, throughout the process of the project, and it was actually before the project, that we spoke with two users. And finally, to be able to use that kind of tool and that solution that was being proposed, we would ask ourselves, who could these companies and institutions be? Initially, the quickest was getting support from private companies. Of course, we would wish we had support from Incopesca and many public institutions, so that in that they also need it themselves. And for some time we focused on Martec, which is a maniculture company in the country. They have their operations in Quepos, but also in Bejuco Beach, in Guanacaste, and the touristical development in Papagayo Peninsula. That at their moment, during their moment, we had meetings at the beginning where they showed interest for the project to be able themselves to take some action whenever these events happen. So as a summary, I already spoke about HydroSec, Water Insight and Towning. We, the three of us, have been the leaders of the project, but we also had the important support from the other professionals, Annalise, Lazarus, Marcel, Annie, and Marianella, who's not here, but she's a marine biologist, an expert in the recollection of samples of phytoplankton, which is the what causes the red tide. Here are some results from the beta version of an online platform of data. Here we can observe the temperature of the ocean and also the concentration of chlorophyll, which is basically an indicator of red tide. First, we took the task of really seeing and observing if we can see that with teledetection, and the answer was yes. We can see beforehand that on February 17th, 2022, the event in the Papagayo Gulf was amazing, confirmed with the Papagayo Peninsula. We can see high concentrations of chlorophyll that varies from 10 to 12 milligrams per liter or more. Of course, that's the first source of information that allows us, and he was also mentioning that it allows oversee big areas in the ocean and monitor day by day whatever happens and the changes in different parameters and different variables. Although we also want to validate and calibrate that information. As scientists, we also want to know, like, is this saying something that is correct? What is the correlation or the error margin? So it's important to do some measurements out there on the field. We have already done 2 measurements on February 6th and April 17th this year, and we have seen a considerable increase compared to February. Actually, with more sources of information that I'm going to talk about, we determined that on April 17th there was a mild red tide event. Another source of information that we spoke about is the communal monitoring, the community monitoring. So this they collect. We are collecting pictures of the color of the ocean, of the water, so that we can have an indicator of the status and quality of the water. This is thanks to a patrol that takes off every day, patrols and surveils the ocean. So they already have a patrol that monitors the Papagayo Gulf. So we said, well, let's take advantage of that, and all of them have a phone, and you already have a handy tool, Eye on Water Color. You can only use it on your phone, and you can take pictures of the color of the ocean. That was amazing. We simply were able to use their participation out there in the ocean to gather that information. Then we took the task. We had a lot of support from Water Insight that they already have experience with the satellite images, checking in the past as well how the chlorophyll concentration has changed in the years for February, March, and April. And we started seeing how those peaks were behaving. We have the ease of the same tool that I showed at the beginning of doing parcels on sites that we're interested in, because these are raster kind of maps, but if we are really interested in a particular area, we can do a parcel on an average to check how this has behaved during the last few days. Here, the same figure from before, just comparing with a measuring tool, Optimal, developed by Water Insight as well, that monitors chlorophyll every 15 minutes. That is another source of information, of course. And we've had a good correlation from April up to today with the satellite image compared to the measurement equipment. So, based on these results, and we are still missing a whole year of project, but the goal is developing a service, and not only for Papagayo Martec, but we can talk about Incopesca and government institutions, the same environment ministry as well, where they can have access to maps and daily data for red tides through an application or an online platform. Or they can even receive an email of an alert where we would be measuring that the concentration don't go over a certain limit or threshold, and they can take action in that regard. I already talked about the beneficiaries, stakeholders, and collaborators. Peninsula Papagayo invested for the development of the project, and they also did and showed their commitment to pay for an eventual service if the service would end up being successful at the end. But that motivates us a lot so that we can develop a tool that can be valuable. Other stakeholders and beneficiaries, institutions like Incopesca, hotels in the coast, the operating tour that do diving tours and sport fishing. They're very interested in knowing where to go. And at the end, it is a social impact. If the water quality diminishes, then also the companies and the participation in companies as well. The government and the environmental ministry, non-governmental. We can also talk about FICOP, which is an NGO for the sport fishing activity, and also insurances that can use this information as a risk index. And finally, what do we want to achieve with MARES? With MARES, we achieve better information about the location, intensity of red tides, and changes in the quality of water, so that governments can warn, so that we don't pick or consume mussels, and that organizations can save oceanic species and flora and fauna as well. With an early alert, for example, tourism operators in the coasts can also be aware of that. The same fishing industry knows where to go exactly to fish. Sometimes they have said that we have gone out there and we went to a site, but it was not the ideal site. So then there's more gas consumed, and it's an economical loss for them. If it's it could be even the same artisan fisherman that can follow and gather this information. Maniculture and the insurances that I was commenting you about. Usually insurances, what they do is an evaluation of the impact or the damage that an event caused. For example, a hurricane or any event like a flood. Although with a tool like this one, we could be speaking about a threshold limit where if it goes over the threshold, then the insurance would have to cover the damages. Here we're very active in social media. We were actually named and we were named for the event of CISOS Friday and Saturday, so I invite you to follow us on social media as well and see if we can finish that project in a year in a successful manner. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alex. We are now deep in the ocean. Following up, we're going to have the participation of Marnix London, co-founder of Water Insight, a company that offers information services that is optical about water quality based on data obtained by satellite and optical instruments for the detection whether it's autonomous, closed, and flexible. They lend services, scientific services, management of water, also professionals in agriculture and sewer operators around the world. This is our partner for water, just like the presentation from before that we had with Alexione, like the engineers in science. We're going to hear Dr. Lanning with the presentation of ecological monitoring the quality of water using remote sensors and close sensing. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for inviting me. Y hasta ahí llega mi español, así que vamos a hacer el resto en inglés. Alex ya habló mucho acerca del proyecto en el que estamos participando, que se enfoca en en la detección de las mareas rojas. Y yo voy a hablar un poco más acerca de otras aplicaciones de la calidad del agua, un poco de la historia también acerca de estos sensores remotos y algunos patrones que nosotros observamos como una compañía en Europa en cuanto a la calidad del agua y el monitoreo en sí, en general. Un par de los temas más básicos de la calidad del agua. Lo más fácil de explicar es que todos ustedes ya hacen revisiones y monitoreos de calidad de agua óptica. Si se sientan o se ponen a la par de un lago o un cuerpo de agua, notan inmediatamente el color del agua de superficie. Y yo hice unos ejemplos aquí que están claros. El agua puede estar turbia, puede estar teniendo basura o plantas, o puede haber mucha intervención de compuestos orgánicos en el agua. Parece ser Coca-Cola también, por ejemplo. Y eso es algo cualitativo, una evaluación cualitativa remota, lo que nos gusta a nosotros hacer con equipos bastante caros como satélites y instrumentos motorizados cercanos, es para hacer esta observación más cuantitativa, hasta el punto que, por ejemplo, el número de clorofila que se está produciendo por un satélite o por un instrumento de monitoreo cercano, como me gusta decirlo, es tan poco preciso como una lectura de laboratorio. Entonces, ¿cómo funciona? Bueno, nosotros vemos cercanamente el color. Los satélites tienen ciertas bandas de color que también son instrumentos que son de precisión alta, que hacen mediciones acerca de cada color en el espectro y vemos las reflexiones, entonces la cantidad de agua que regresa de esta superficie de agua. La luz, como la vemos, puede tener picos y también hendiduras, lo cual está conectado al contenido de clorofila aquí y aquí. Por ejemplo, que puede ser afectado por otros pigmentos, como esta, que puede ser antibacterial. La altura de este espectro se determina por la cantidad de sedimento en el agua, porque usualmente está bastante reflectivos. Y más hacia la izquierda en este espectro, ahí es donde tenemos los efectos de materia orgánica, que es la gran parte de la intervención de la materia orgánica en la superficie. Esto es básicamente lo que hacemos. Buscamos este espectro reflectivo. Nosotros utilizamos básicamente dos niveles de motores remotos, utilizando satélites. Generan imágenes satelitales, las cuales no son más que píxeles, y todos estos píxeles que se contienen dentro de estas imágenes para mostrar todo este espectro reflectivo. También hay otra manera, otro método que es de cercano. Un espectrómetro, por ejemplo, que usualmente es lo que tenemos y se utiliza muy cercano a la superficie, entonces es de superficie cercana. Y esto comenzó como un medio para validar los productos satelitales. Ahora también puede utilizar este tipo de dispositivos para hacer monitoreo sin la necesidad de todos los aspectos satelitales. Es otra manera de hacer mediciones de la calidad de agua. Siguiente.
¿Cuáles son las ventajas de los mapas basados en los satélites? Bueno, lógicamente hay una mejor visión en vez de solamente algunos puntos. Claro, se podría tener puntos de de
remote
medición,
sensing is
una
just
red
the
de
best
medición muy
way to
buena,
gain
pero
spatial
igual
insight in
la mejor manera de
phenomena.
obtener este tipo de visión
Satellites
espacial
cover the
es con
entire
el
world,
satélite. Y el satélite
and
cubre
even with
todo el
a
planeta.
joke maybe, you can
Y
also use remote
quizás
sensing on different planets as
también
well
hasta
with
se
a
podría
satellite.
decir que
Um,
hasta, quizás con un poquito de
there are
broma, hasta se
relatively no
podría
costs involved,
hacer
so
monitoreo de otros
according to
planetas, siempre y
the
cuando haya
new
un
Copernicus
satélite.
program,
Entonces,
there
bueno,
are
vemos aquí
satellites
que
in orbit.
tenemos varios
Everyone, even you
programas con
guys, can
satélites en
download
órbita
these images from
y
the
cualquier
sat
persona
content,
podría bajar
and
estas
work with them.
imágenes y
Um,
trabajar con
what
ellas.
we usually do
Lo
for
que
the commercial
nosotros
purpose at
usualmente
the Ultraman,
hacemos para,
of course, we are a
desde un punto de
value-added
vista
company, so
comercial,
there are some costs involved.
claro, hay
Yet
algunos
again,
costos
it will still
involucrados,
be
sin
much
embargo,
cheaper than any
aún así
traditional
sería
sampling.
mucho más barato
They can be of
que
daily frequency
un
of
muestreo
satellite
tradicional.
maps, or even more than daily frequency if you would
Puede
use
haber
commercially available satellite,
hasta más de la
which is in a
frecuencia
very recent
diaria.
development.
Ese es un
Um,
desarrollo muy interesante.
the data is available near real time, so
La
you
información
cannot
está
take a sample, go
disponible
to lab,
casi en
wait
tiempo
until you have
real.
enough samples to
Si
cost-effectively
uno
run
tuviera
an analysis.
suficiente datos
The data can
para
be
sobrellevar un
then
análisis, sería muy
quite
económico.
quickly. And it's also possible to
Y
look back
también
in
es
time.
posible
So we've
mirar
done that
en el
a couple of
pasado,
times for
digamos, ver
projects where there was a request, hey, we
información
want
anterior,
to know how
como por
something
ejemplo,
happened in a lake.
queremos ver
Well, then
cómo
it's
se sucede
a
algo en
very
un
good
lago. Bueno,
alternative
es
to
una muy
use
buena
remote sensing
alternativa.
and actually look back
Y
in
en
time.
realidad es
So
ver
when
en
the
el
satellite
pasado, en
actually
el
was
tiempo que
actually
ya
launched. So
pasó.
for instance, for Sentinel satellites, we
Como
go
por
back
ejemplo
to
con
2015.
satélites de
It's also very
Centinela,
useful to do
se
baseline
puede utilizar
analysis.
eso,
So
se
if you
pueden
want
hacer
to do a
estudios
change, you want
de
to start
baseline,
with a
de una línea
restoration.
base,
What is our baseline?
y entonces así
Next,
determinar
please.
cuál es nuestra base.
Another example of
Otro
an
ejemplo
application
sobre
is
una
the dredging of the,
aplicación
the monitoring
es
of dredging films.
dirigir el monitoreo
So when I started with the company about 20 years ago, one of the first type of lines that we
de, por
approached
ejemplo,
were large
los
dredging
penachos
companies.
de
We
dragado.
told them, okay,
Cuando yo
we
empecé
can
con esta
show you
empresa hace algún
what is the
tiempo,
impact of what you are
podemos ver
doing.
cuál es el impacto de lo que usted
They
está
laughed at me
haciendo.
because they
Ellos
really
se
didn't
rieron
care.
de mí porque
We are
realmente
now
no les
20 years
importaba,
on
pero
board,
ahora ya
and
han
now
pasado
they do
20
care.
años y ahora sí les
They've
importa.
been made to care
Se les
because
ha
of
hecho
all
que
sorts
les
of
importe
compliance
por un montón
regulations.
de
And they can no
regulaciones
longer
que son
do what they
obligatorias
please because
y ahora ya no pueden solo
otherwise
hacer
their operation will be stopped.
lo que
If
les dé la gana, porque si
the,
no muchas
the
empresas sus
necessity
operaciones
is
podrían
better.
hasta parar.
If they have to stop for a day, this means losses up to
Si
like
ellos tienen que
100,000
parar por un
dollars a
día,
day
por
of
ejemplo,
operation because
¿cuántas
these ships are
pérdidas
incredibly
podrían tener?
expensive to operate. So
Muchas de estas
they now
operaciones
care.
son
So they
muy
want to know what is
costosas
happening. Next, please.
y ahora les importa y quieren saber qué es lo que está
Something
pasando.
else of interest.
Otra cosa de interés, posiblemente para Costa Rica, es el monitoreo de el alga, algas marinas. Es un problema que está creciendo en el Caribe. Y ahora, bueno, hay muchas playas que están dependientes del turismo. Y ahora, bueno, se dan cuenta que las playas están siendo contaminadas. Es muy fácil, bueno, poder monitorear esto. Monitorear el sargazo, esta alga, porque es más fácil, puedes incluso limpiar esto en las costas. Otra cosa aquí, volviendo a la inspección digital, como empresa empezamos a construir nuestros propios instrumentos Y también desarrollamos una estación, unos instrumentos que permanecen en una estación que también está siendo utilizado dentro del proyecto LARS y mide continuamente, escanea la superficie acuática cada 15 minutos. Y claro, aquí vemos cómo están estas lecturas que son reflejadas. Esta información es de alto espectro. Entonces, vemos que una ambición muy importante de este proyecto es obtener dentro del espectro diferentes especies de alga, lo cual sería muy bueno. Es básicamente como tomar una foto. Lo que hacemos con los instrumentos es algo avalado por los diferentes proyectos, y este tipo de información es muy útil para modelos ecológicos, y muchas veces se puede tener uno o dos interrupciones o problemitas, pero generalmente ese tipo de equipos tienen un mantenimiento muy bajo. Entonces simplemente corren el funcionamiento, la operación es automática y uno las coloca y inmediatamente hay otro instrumento que inmediatamente hay que estarlo limpiando y dándole mantenimiento. Esto es una temporada completa de lo que es el monitoreo del WISP Station, de la estación WISP, del agua de bañarse. Y les estoy mostrando esto porque se puede ver aquí cómo el instrumento funciona para diferentes mediciones acuáticas. Miden en frecuencia hasta más o menos 6 veces al año durante la temporada de baño, donde las personas se bañan porque es obligatorio. Y si uno ve lo que ellas miden, hubo una ocurrencia aquí en el verano donde tuvieron que cerrar la playa. Pero si uno ve la información del WISP Station, de la estación WISP, se ven diferentes puntos donde uno ve que deberían haber cerrado la playa mucho más veces, pero sin embargo lo que se ve ahí es que ahí demora un tiempo y diferentes lecturas necesitan ser tomadas. En el cambio, los diferentes donde florece diferentes bacterias, y vemos que el personal de la Junta del Agua, diferentes lugares donde se baña en Holanda, tienen que determinar las diferentes notificaciones, y las personas de la Junta del Agua dijeron, sí, nosotros levantamos esa prohibición porque las mediciones del viernes estaban bien. Y nosotros dijimos, bueno, pero mire afuera. Y había un florecido de alga muy fuerte. Entonces, ese sistema muchas veces es lejos de lo ideal. Se necesita un tipo de sistema más moderno y pues que calcule mejor. Este lo puedo saltar porque Alex ya explicó todo lo que tiene que ver el proyecto Mares. Bueno, este es de un proyecto que hicimos del monitoreo de floraciones de alga dañinas. No sé si ustedes lo reconocen, pero aquí vemos, tiene que ver con la acuacultura, y lo
and
vemos
they
aquí,
suffer a lot from
y
harmful algal blooms. For
sufren
example, there's a
mucho
harmful algal
de
bloom
floraciones de
that was
algas
toxic
dañinas.
in the mussels,
Pueden
and they
haber
can't sell them anymore.
toxina en
So
los moluscos, y
this guy
entonces ya
really
después no
wanted
se
to know,
pueden
okay,
vender
what can I
más.
expect?
Y este señor específicamente
We did
quería
a whole
saber qué
project
puedo
with them,
esperar.
found out that
Hicimos
the
todo un
algal blooms
proyecto con
were
ellos y
almost
descubrimos que
exclusively caused by an upwelling in this region.
casi que la
So
floración de estas
what
algas
we did,
dañinas estaba siendo generado por
we
una
used a
región
model
específica.
that was already published in the
Utilizamos un
scientific
modelo que ya había sido
publication.
publicado,
We used a model to predict
y
or
con
at
ese
least
modelo pudimos
detect
predecir
the conditions for an upwelling
las
that had to
condiciones
do with wind speed, water temperature,
que tenían
need
que
for
ver
chlorophyll,
con el
concentrations,
velocidad de
etc.
viento,
We set up
velocidad
a
del
model,
agua,
and
diferentes
that would just
aspectos, y
give
eso
automated
simplemente
alert
le dio
that
una
tells us
alerta
what the conditions for an
de
upwelling
las
were.
condiciones que él
If
podía
we
esperar,
could provide that information to the
y
mussel farmers,
eso,
they
entonces le
knew
dimos
that there was
información
a sort of
a
like
las
2/3
personas que
chance that
cultivaban
2
esos
days later,
moluscos, y
within
más o
3
menos
days, there
2,
would
3
be
días
a
después
bloom
se le iba a decir que iba a
and
haber una
the
floración de
okay.
algas.
So at least I mean, it's
Entonces,
not
por lo
a
menos,
100% thing, but
claro,
at
no es
least
algo del
they
100%,
would,
pero
they could already
ellos
harvest
podrían
extra
quizás
mussels
tomar
at such and such
algunas medidas,
production
como por
to
ejemplo
keep
cultivar
going.
los
So they
moluscos
were
de una
quite
manera
pleased with
anticipada.
that. Sadly, the
Eso
economic
estuvo muy bien para ellos.
developments in South Africa are not
Desafortunadamente,
predictable at the moment. So the
los
whole industry is
diferentes
suffering.
desarrollos
A lot of
económicos en
farms
África
still
del Sur
just
no son tan
outbuilding.
favorables,
But they were quite happy with
pero
this
en
whole
general
system.
estaban bastante
Next,
felices
please.
con este sistema.
Okay, so I still have time for this slide.
Bueno, todavía tengo
right?
tiempo para esto,
Because
sí.
this,
Bueno, aquí vemos las tendencias en calidad de agua, en monitoreo de calidad de agua. Algunas tendencias.
I'm not shocking everyone if I say that water quality is deteriorating on a
No
global
estoy
scale.
sorprendiendo a nadie al decir que la calidad de agua está deteriorándose en general a un nivel global. Es importante también en Europa. Hay cada vez más y más regulaciones, diferentes cumplimientos, y necesitamos realizar un esfuerzo para que la calidad de agua permanezca en la agenda política. Hay también cada vez más interés comercial en la información de calidad de agua, como tenemos, por ejemplo, el acuacultura. Por ejemplo, esperábamos una fuente de proteína fuerte, tiene que venir de la acuacultura, porque tenemos que bajarle al ganado, porque eso es muy dañino para el ambiente. Después tenemos lo que es el dragado, el rasteo. Ya no está aceptando eso porque están contaminando todo, pero en general las personas quieren nadar, quieren seguir nadando, pero no quieren nadar donde hay contaminación. Entonces, por ejemplo, el Reino Unido hizo Brexit, ¿y qué pasó? Se fueron, y ahora están nadando en materia fecal porque dejaron de utilizar las directrices de cumplimiento europea. Yo creo que nadie aquí quiere eso. Primero porque es muy frío, pero además no se debería porque es muy peligroso. Es un mercado también que está creciendo por todos estos puntos pues previos. Después también vamos. También vemos que nuestros clientes, científicos, dirigentes del agua, personas de maricultura, ellos quieren tener una subcontratación, quieren tener un experto en todos los temas, no quieren comprar todo tipo de equipo y que después de 4 o 5 años haya que comprar otro equipo, etcétera. Entonces ellos lo que quieren es una subcontratación, un outsourcing. Y después eso, bueno, se relaciona con el último también. Yo veo este tipo de tendencia en las informaciones también. Vemos también una transformación digital enorme que fue acelerada por el COVID. Durante el tiempo de COVID había muy difícil para tener personas manejando, cogiendo el muestreo, yendo a las tierras, muchísimas dificultades para eso, pero entonces las personas dijeron, pero un momento, quizás si tuviéramos un sistema automático ya en el lugar, eso podría ayudar muchísimo. Y sí, ciertamente ayuda muchísimo. Entonces eso es algo que se está acelerando cada vez más en Holanda. Tienen muchos, en los Países Bajos, pues ya está utilizando muchos sistemas automáticos. Después, la mitigación automática requerida y que en muchos cambios significa que, bueno, por ejemplo, aquí nosotros tenemos un buen ejemplo, tenemos una buena reputación para el agua de baño, en donde se puede bañar. Y el director del agua lo que quiere utilizar es utilizar esa información de tiempo real, que si hay mucha bacteria, simplemente cierran la playa y hacen un lavado, digamos, del lago. Si usted lo comprueba con una manera tradicional de que simplemente se va, se toma un muestreo, después se hace el análisis en el laboratorio, después se ven los resultados, toma más de una semana. En cambio, si fuera mucho más rápido, si fuera automático. Y eso es un poquito como el santo grial aquí. Podemos utilizar toda esta información digital para hacer modelos. Y el realizar los modelos es muy hermoso. Y también las personas, los científicos dicen, bueno, entonces ya podemos tener los modelos y también podemos hacer pronósticos. Eso es algo interesante y no hay muchas tendencias de pronóstico en este momento. También hay muchos desarrollos de inteligencia artificial donde tendríamos muchas predicciones, muchos pronósticos de todo lo que se podría pensar. Y después estoy regresando a la información como un servicio. Hay mucho tipo de interés en este tipo de actividades de monitoreo, como por ejemplo la mía. Por ejemplo, yo estoy en este trabajo hace 20 años y cuando yo realicé mis estudios, antes de eso, como un estudio, tenía que hacer todas las medidas, todos los equipos, toda fórmula que se utilizaba. Era necesario que usted mismo se lo hiciera. Y ahora, si yo lo pienso como cuando estaba haciendo ese doctorado, yo ahora pienso, un momento, si ahora yo simplemente pudiera utilizar la información que usted tiene, es un cambio muy grande. Entonces vemos a la información como un servicio, como un modelo para personas que investigan. Incluso hay algo que se llama información de análisis listo. Por ejemplo, decir desde aquí a aquí esta resolución en Costa Rica, esta información, en fin, algo que a mí antes me duraba como meses en obtener mi doctorado. Entonces, bueno, yo creo que la información como un servicio es algo que va a estar aumentando mucho más en los próximos años. El futuro del monitoreo como un todo, de verdad creo que quiero decir esto. Yo soy muy entusiasta sobre lo que es el sensores remotos, pero eso no va a reemplazar los muestreos en sitio. No es mágico. Hay retos, hay muchos retos involucrados con utilizar los sensores remotos. Por ejemplo, si hay nubes no se pueden hacer nada. Hay otro que es el cat feeling, que para mí no es muy bueno, pero para otras personas sí les sirve y se puede utilizar para mucho, pero no va a reemplazar el muestreo en el sitio. Vemos que diferentes archivos, hay muchos pocos parámetros que no se pueden ver directamente, entonces nunca lo va a reemplazar. Pero lo que sí veo, y eso es algo que la Agencia Nacional de Monitoreo de los Países Bajos mencionaría, es que quieren obtener un modelo donde van a utilizar el monitoreo automático para el monitoreo diario, y si ven algo extraño, una anomalía dentro de esa información, entonces ellos ahí envían personas en sitio, quizás más de 100,000 diferentes posibilidades de detección.
Por lo tanto, harían todo lo que sea necesario para poder averiguar qué es lo que está sucediendo. Pero eso es una manera, un método costo eficiente para trabajar. También esperaba muchas más agencias o compañías también que podrían cambiar a un modelo en donde cosas como datos, utilizar datos de otras estaciones que podían ser el pilar de su sistema de monitoreo de si algo no estuviera funcionando, entonces sacan ese método alternativo. Lo que sí observo en puntos anteriores, hay bastante validación y calibración que todavía se requiere, pero eso aplica para todo método de monitoreo. Entonces no aplica solamente como para imágenes satelitales, para que se necesita la validación de calibración, sino estaríamos viendo cosas sin sentido. Usualmente veo personas que se dan cuenta de la página en línea de Copérnicos que tienen productos de clorofila globales y son muy buenos, son de buena calidad. Sí vemos a escala global, ¿verdad? Pero si utilizamos un producto global y se utiliza el Golfo de Papagayo y se hace una lupa hacia allá, no tiene sentido, pero ese no es el propósito. Siempre se necesitará validación de calibración y creo que una de las cosas para tener buenos productos satelitales es tener las redes de sensores para poder hacer esa validación de calibración. Algo muy bueno también del programa de Copérnicos que menciono mucho y no puedo decirlo suficientes veces es que Copérnicos es muy bueno porque por primera vez hay sensores garantizados. Yo he trabajado con Maris por mucho tiempo, muy buenos satélites. De un día al otro dejó de funcionar. Perdí a mis clientes. Copernicus es muy bueno porque ellos tienen para cada satélite tienen al menos 2 y por lo tanto tienen un programa y de esa manera los más antiguos se van a reemplazar en algún punto. Es realmente importante porque se garantiza un flujo de datos. También un aumento de opciones de sensores. Es un gran desarrollo porque no solamente se trata de uno, sino de 3 o 4 tipos de compañías que están haciendo lanzamientos de satélites pequeños bastante frecuentemente porque es muy bueno. Están compitiendo y eso quiere decir que los precios bajan y lo que también quiere decir que incluso para proyectos de investigación estos tipos de datos se enriquecen. Algo bueno también es que tienen todas estas constelaciones, lo que quiere decir que también van a tener 1, 2 o 3 o hasta 7 u 8 satélites en la misma ubicación en el planeta todos los días. Así que hay un proyecto bastante bueno de Harvard de Rotterdam en donde vamos a obtener 5 o 6 imágenes en un solo día porque están haciendo un experimento. Eso para mí es una locura. Nunca he anticipado tener tantos datos como esos, porque de hecho se puede dar un seguimiento a eventos y es genial. Y no es solamente de luz visible, pero también hay compañías que están entrando a detalles como de constelaciones de temperatura con satélite con alta resolución. La temperatura, entrando en este proyecto MARIS, la temperatura en el océano es muy importante, es un parámetro que ahora vemos que se está guiando muchos desarrollos y da mucha diferencia a los patrones de largo plazo que conocemos de los océanos. Hay temperaturas muy altas en ciertos lugares en el mundo. Y eso al menos es algo muy bueno de que podamos medirlo. Es un gran desarrollo. Y bueno, esa es la última diapositiva. Por tanto, nuevamente, muchas gracias por tenerme acá. Y puedo seguir hablando por horas, pero solo tenía 15 minutos. Así que vamos a pasar el micrófono. Qué bueno.
Bueno, ha sido una jornada bastante intensa, ya son las 12:26, se terminaba a las 12.
Round of speeches. This would end at 12, so I'm going to use
síntesis
very quick
cuántica del cerebro para hacer un
brain
resumen
to do
de
a
todas
summary
las
of all the
presentaciones
presentations
y ver lo más
and
importante
observe
que
what is
hemos
most
estado
important
discutiendo
that we've been
después de hacer
talking
sus
about
preguntas,
after
¿verdad?
doing
Sí
your
les voy a dar
questions.
5 minutos
I'm
ahí
going to
más o
give you
menos
5
si tienen
minutes
alguna
for
pregunta.
questions.
¿Alguna pregunta?
Any question?
Bien.
Christian?
Sí, muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much, Marnix. So I was wondering,
Me preguntaba
you know, conditions for alga bloom
condiciones para
are complex to determine, right?
el brillo de la alga. Es bastante complejo determinar la condición que facilita el brillo.
And so I understand this works like
¿Verdad?
very
Y
important
me imagino que esto funciona como un sistema de advertencia temprana más que el impacto y tratar de prevenir y tomar acción para diferentes usuarios, para tomar acción y decisiones en cuanto a una situación que esté ocurriendo en el momento. Lo que me preocupaba, me preguntaba si esto se puede rastrear la presión o la condición que produce la proliferación de algas. Si se puede rastrear y ver de dónde viene. Esa es especialmente la pregunta que tengo. No tratar de ver la respuesta, sino más bien las presiones y los conductores de estas condiciones.
Thank you.
Gracias, de hecho es una buena pregunta. Es parte de una pregunta de investigación. Me parece, no está dentro de este MARIS Project para poder explicarlo de cuándo y cómo es que se da esta proliferación, pero sí pienso que los sensores remotos podrían jugar un papel muy importante acá. Si vemos a largo plazo grupos de datos de imágenes y se han grabado las ocurrencias de estas proliferaciones, entonces de hecho se pueden ver todas estas manchas y qué es lo que sucede antes de esto, qué otros datos tenemos que pueden influir, por ejemplo descargas de ríos, otros eventos que pueden ocurrir. Entonces toda esa información, si se combina eso,
at least it will give you
al
more
menos va a dar
insight into
más
what's going on. I'm not sure if
introspección
you can
acerca
say,
de lo que
okay,
está
these
sucediendo.
conditions, okay, tomorrow
No
we have
necesariamente
to-
estas condiciones. Ok, bueno, entonces mañana va a haber un florecimiento, ¿no? O una proliferación. No, no creo que se pueda de esa manera, pero sí se puede dar mucha información para tener una imagen más amplia.
Muchas gracias a todos los participantes.
Thank you all
Muy
participants.
interesante todas las presentaciones.
Presentations have been very important. So my question is for Dr. Nuria. In the case of being able to do a copy of the research with institutions, mostly those that are international, how is that experience? That's first getting close to these institutions to be able to create all these workshops and training. And citizens and communities can understand the importance of water and what this role they play.
Gracias, Ani. Sí, es una pregunta importante.
Thank you. That is actually an important question.
Siempre han sido,
In our case,
o bien previamente por acercamiento, es decir,
it has been
República
to
Dominicana
get close. For example,
se
when
acercaron a
we
nosotros,
Dominican Republic actually reached us
y luego, la verdad,
to
al final han
interact,
sido
and
contactos, ¿no?
at the end, it's about contact.
Pues empezamos en República Dominicana,
So we
luego
started
en Honduras había un profesor que
contacting
había hecho la tesis
Honduras. There
en
was
la
a teacher that
universidad.
did the thesis in
Entonces,
our
a través de-
university,
al
so
final siempre
through
son
them.
contactos
At the end, it's
también,
always about
como
contacts,
estas, congresos,
being part of this Congress
contar el
and
proyecto.
meetings like this one.
Siempre la idea es que cuando se cuenta el proyecto, pues quien quiera unirse, pues que
So
nos
considering the project,
contacte.
whoever wants to
Al final
join,
ha
they
sido
can
un
contact
poco,
us. So
pues,
at the end,
tanto
it's a lot of
personales
contact,
también, con
personal
vosotros, a través de
people,
un conocido común en Honduras,
through an acquainted person in Honduras in this case.
casualidades, ¿no?
So it's just
y bueno, pues se va creando un
random,
poco
and
una red que creo que
we
es
start creating a
importante, ¿no?
network that is important.
Eso en cuanto a generación de red, luego en cuanto
That's in terms of the
cómo
network.
comunicar, ¿no? Hacer partícipes.
How
Yo, es un poco lo que comentaba, yo creo que
to
cuando
communicate it, to participate,
conoces un
that's
sistema,
different.
bueno, lo analizas,
When you get to
ves
know
los
a system,
resultados y lo empiezas a comprender,
if
creo
you
que
get to
ahí
understand, and
viene
if
el
there
compromiso.
are results, that's where the
Una
commitment
cosa es
comes.
estar en una clase teórica que te lo cuenta,
One thing
¿no?
is
Como
having a
los profesores.
theoretical class that can tell you
Cambia
about
mucho cuando lo
something,
ves y lo
but
haces
it
en
changes whenever you
práctica,
see
¿no?
that
Creo
in
que
the
los
practice
profesores
out
aquí
there.
lo pueden decir, no es lo mismo, ¿no? En teoría, cuando vas a la práctica, vas a las muestras y ves los resultados.
So
Yo creo que lo
you
mismo
can
pasa
see
con la
the
población.
results with practice, and
Cuando
the
ya
same
tanto
thing happens
tiempo
with the
con los
population.
planes
Whenever they
científicos,
start
haces un análisis,
understanding
entiendes mejor
pillars, the
el
scientific
sistema y creo que es cuando puedes
foundation,
empezar a protestar. Para
you
mí es
understand the system and you can start
conocimiento y cara
protecting.
a protección.
So knowledge
Conocimiento
means, and as
profundo.
the experience and having that knowledge means you can start protecting as well.
Sí, bueno, la última pregunta porque ya me están
Last question,
sacando
because
de
they're
la mano.
already pulling me out of the room.
Mi pregunta es para el señor
My
Alex.
question is for Alex.
Felicitarlo por la
It's a
presentación
pleasure
muy buena.
and congratulations for that
Mi nombre es
presentation. It's
Julián,
very good.
soy
I'm
de
Julian,
Hidrológica
an hydrologic engineering student,
una
participating in the
pregunta con respecto a
HydroSec.
los datos.
So,
Los datos que
a question
ustedes,
about data, the data that you
es
collect,
decir, con lo de
specifically
las maneras
in regards
rojas,
to the red
una
ties,
base
is
de
that
datos que
on a
tenga un
database
público
that has a
privado.
public domain or private domain?
Sí, muy buena la pregunta.
That's actually a
No,
good
no,
question.
a ver, este proyecto no es un proyecto de
This
investigación.
project is
¿no?
not a
O sea,
research project to
es
begin
parte
with.
de,
So
bueno,
it
una,
is,
es solamente
uh,
una universidad que
part.
se dedica a hacer proyectos de investigación.
National University is a project that is dedicated to that
Digamos, uno
research
esperaría que un
part.
proyecto,
One would
¿verdad? que
expect
esté
that
involucrado en la
a
universidad,
project that is involved
los
with the
datos sean
university
públicos.
data can be public.
Digamos, el objetivo, la meta final
Now the end goal
de este proyecto
of this
es desarrollar un
project is
servicio,
developing a
¿no?
service,
Pero, digamos, durante
but
este proyecto
during this
queremos,
project and throughout the
tener
project,
más aliados.
we want to have
Y
more
queremos compartir los
allies
datos.
and
De
we want
hecho,
to share
no
data.
tenemos temor en
We don't fear
compartir los datos.
sharing data. As
De
such,
hecho, también tenemos pues una conciencia social.
we have a
ambiental
social and environmental
dentro del
awareness
proyecto mismo.
in the
Desde el
project
principio,
from the
vivieron
beginning. I
la
don't know if you
metodología
saw the
que
methodology
planificamos, ahí
that
mismo
we
hablamos de que
planned,
es
and we were
importantísimo
talking about
que
how
también,
important
pues, una forma que el proyecto pueda tener
It
impacto
was so that a
positivo para
project
las
can have a
comunidades,
positive impact on
digamos,
communities
pescadores, artesanales.
and for fishermen in the area as well.
Entonces yo creo que estamos abiertos a,
So I think that
a
we're
escuchar,
open,
¿verdad?
listening
Ya
to
nosotros,
and hearing.
nosotros no
The
queremos que
idea
el proyecto
is not
termine
really
en un año.
for the project to
Que
finish in
normalmente
a
los
year.
proyectos tienen un inicio y un
Projects have
final,
a start date and due date,
pero queremos que esto
but
siga.
we want this to continue.
Entonces, entre más aliados, más
So
compañías o
as long as we
instituciones
have more
que
allies and
puedan
more
llegar
companies
y
and
tengan interés,
institutions that can
pues
join
esos
and
datos
are
pueden llegar
interested,
a
then
donde
this
quiera,
data can
¿verdad?
reach wherever
Puede llegar al gobierno de
it
Costa
can
Rica
get
y
to the
pues,
Costa
puede ser
Rican
útil
government and it can
para-
be useful
para tomar mejores
to
decisiones de
make better
planificación.
decisions and planning.
Entonces, bueno, la respuesta corta es
So the short answer
los datos son
is
públicos.
data are public.
Pero digamos, no sabemos qué va a pasar después
We
de
don't know what's going to
un año
happen
que
after
termine
a
el
year
proyecto.
that the project
Pero sí
finishes.
son públicos en
But
este
these
momento.
are
Si usted quisiera
public right
tener
now.
acceso,
If you want to have access to them, I can send them to you.
Muchas gracias, Alex. Bueno, un comercial primero, un Chevy
So a
blanco,
little ad.
blanco
One
FS
Chevy
FMS
FMS
090.
090. Anyone here? Okay.
Bueno, para cerrar, ¿verdad? Que
Just to
podamos
close out,
ver primero lo que,
that we
con lo
can
que
see
dice Nuria,
first
me gustó
with what
mucho
Nuria is saying.
sobre el
I
conocimiento.
liked what you said about the knowledge. Knowing our systems is very important.
La apropiación de los espacios.
Get appropriated of the spaces.
Te vale que era Julián. Bueno, solamente cuando conocemos, cuando nos
So just
empoderamos de
when we
nuestros
know and
territorios,
we get
podemos
empowered
generar
in
cambios
our territories, we can
importantes.
generate
Cambios que
important
tienen que
changes.
ir enlazados con la
Changes that are
legislación
linked
o la
to
falta de
the
legislación para
legislation
que
of the
pueda
law
haber
or
una
the lack of it,
legislación.
so that there can
¿Verdad?
be a
Esta parte de
legislation
la
eventually.
experiencia que ya hay
That is part of the
en
experience
España
that
y
we
que
already,
está
that we already saw in
moviéndose en
Spain
Europa.
and that is moving
La
around in Europe.
participación ciudadana,
The
el monitoreo en
community
sí, podemos
participation,
ver
the
cómo
monitoring
es
insight.
importante, ha
We
sido
can
importante
understand how
durante
that
muchos
has been
años y
important
lo
for
sigue
many years,
siendo
and it's
a pesar de la evolución de
still
la
very
ciencia y la
important,
tecnología,
although
que no debe parar.
the
Es
science
algo
and
que no
technology
podemos
is evolving, something
quedarnos
that
a
must
donde
not
estamos,
stop.
sino que tenemos que avanzar y
So
que
we
ojalá
have
que
to
este
advance
país
on it, and
no
hopefully this
termine
country does not
de dejar de invertir en
finish
ciencia y
and end
tecnología
up
para el
not
desarrollo
investing
de
in
este
science
tipo
technology for the
de
development of this type
tecnologías
of
de
technologies.
avanzada
It
para
should
poder
continue
tener
doing that.
conocimiento en
To be
tiempo
able to
real
have
y
real-time knowledge
mayormente validado y calibrado.
validated and that
Entonces
is
también
well
podemos
calibrated.
resumir
So
que
we can also
no
summarize
solamente lo que se mide se puede
that not just
gestionar.
whatever
Entonces,
is
si no
measured can be
conocemos, no
managed. So if
tenemos
we don't
datos, no
know and
tenemos,
we don't have any data
mediciones
and we don't measure
a nivel comunitario como a
at a
nivel de
community
tiempo
level,
cada
but
15
also
minutos, no
real time
podemos
every 15
tener
minutes,
el
we
conocimiento
cannot have
es
the
poder.
knowledge. Knowledge
Y
is
es el
power.
poder de cambiar las
It is
cosas
the
y
power of
mejorar
changing things and
el
improving
océano y los ecosistemas
ocean
fluviales que
and
tenemos. Con
water
esto cierro para
ecosystems.
no
With this, I'm
seguir
closing so
hablando
that we
porque
don't continue
luego
talking.
uno cantinflea que llaman. Pero es muy importante la participación ciudadana, la
Important to have this
colaboración,
community
la
participation,
articulación
collaboration,
interinstitucional,
articulation between institutions
intersectorial
and
e
between
internacional,
sectors
las tres
and,
I's. Podemos
different
terminar ahí.
countries as well.
Muchísimas gracias
We
a
can
todos y
finish
a
off
todas.
here. Thank you, everyone.
¿No? Se pueden
Now,
dirigir al
everyone, you
almuerzo
can go
en el
to
toldo de la
have lunch
izquierda.
in
Es el que dio comida.
uh, section at the left.